everyone, and welcome to Can I Just Say, a Common Room Radio podcast. I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive, and we have a beloved guest here, Louise Barnes.
Hello, everyone.
Louise, we know because we love her, but also originally because you played Miranda Barlow on Black Sails.
Yes, I am Mrs. Barlow, or Lady Hamilton, or yes, Miranda.
The Barlow woman.
That woman, yes.
The Barlow woman. Oh, and speaking of Black Sails, for those of you who don't know, who might be coming to us for the first time, Elizabeth and I have another podcast called Fathoms Deep, which we covered Black Sails. And today is a special day because another podcast about Black Sails has just begun. It's called Hoist the Colors, spelled with the British spelling of color, which is C-O-L-O-U-R.
Right.
Yes, I do know how to do that. And we did, in the most part, episode by episode coverage and interviews with the lovely cast and production people, and their perspective on the show is going to be looking at Black Sails characters and themes from a specifically queer perspective. And I know I'm really excited to listen to them.
That'll be amazing.
Yeah, go find them. They are on Podbean and soon to be on iTunes, and they're also on Twitter. So happy about that. But what we're covering today is...
All together now.
Is A Room with a View. Yes. So this is the 1985 Merchant Ivory production of adaptation of the book, which Elizabeth and I covered in the last episode, so you can go find that if you haven't listened to it. And what we usually do when we start talking about a story is we ask everyone their history with it. Elizabeth and I covered our history last week, so Louise, please tell us your history with this film.
I listened to the podcast just prepping for this, and it was wonderful. But the question that you asked was, something you spoke about was when you first came across it, and I don't actually remember the first time I saw it. What I do know is that I have seen it many, 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 many times. The most recent of which was 2 days ago. It was one of those films that came along, I guess, in 1985. I didn't see it in 1985 because I was 11 in 1985. So I didn't see it then, but I must have seen it fairly soon thereafter. South Africa didn't get films in kind of real time. So I think probably it came to us maybe 2 years later. So perhaps I was 13 or 14. And it has defined my notion of romance. To a certain extent, it set me on a path to being an actress. Although I had always been acting, and my first professional role was in a funnily enough, it's amazing how this all comes together. Was in a television series called Where Angels Tread, not Where Angels Tread.
Oh, that's hilarious!
Ian Forster novel,
right?
So it was and I played a Lucy Honeychurch. It was period piece. I had the curls, the dark curls.
Yes.
The period was exactly the same. So it just kind of felt like that. Either that the film sort of guided my life in a very sort of subconscious way, or there were just many coincidences, however you like to look at it. And then my husband, I was telling you, my husband, Nick Borain, actually, when I met him and started dating him when he was 21 and I was 18, looked like Julian Sands in George Emerson. He is George Emerson.
Yeah, that's not
George
so
Emerson.
bad.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And this is something I only just realized when Daphne sent me a little gif of George Emerson. It just suddenly came together. There was like, oh my gosh, that was Nick. That is Nick when at 21. So I guess you could say that is my history with the film.
Wow.
I have
pretty intense.
Yeah.
It's so beautifully thematically too. It makes you think of when George Emerson has that line of "I know it was fate, but you can call it Italy if you like."
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Also, totally going to track down somewhere on the internet where I can find that television show.
Oh, I was going to say, find young photos of your husband if you don't mind.
I'll send you those. I'll send you too.
All right. Well, yes, Elizabeth and I did go through that. I did. Yeah, I think I did. I covered the film as well because I couldn't resist because,
of course,
it just was a very big deal for me. I love this film. But what I really want to hear before we start talking about it analytically or whatever is Liz had said that you didn't love it the first time. So now I'm really curious what's your overall impression of this film?
Oh, we're just going to start right from there. It is pressure. Okay. My overall impression. First of all, I want to say that I was able to watch it this time in a remastered HD version that was gorgeous. Initially, I watched it in a pretty crappy standard definition, and it had nothing like the color and vibrancy. So that already helped a lot. It is still not my favorite, ladies. I have to say, I know that that's not what I was so ready to absolutely love it and have it just go right up there with the Sense and Sensibility adaptation that I love so well. But I found that while it was beautiful to behold, it was definitely gorgeous to watch. I felt like it lacks some of in the performances, or I suppose in the direction of the performances is I guess where it was, is that just like the vibrancy, like the vitality. I felt like everything just felt very muted in the way that people spoke, but all the colors were so saturated. So I think that was a choice, that was a choice that was made in the production, but I did not care for Julian Sands through the first half at all. And then they arced him into somebody so different that I couldn't connect those two characters. And yeah, I think that Lucy Honeychurch didn't quite work for me like I wanted her to either. So those are my big, broad, general impressions, but I have lots of other little things.
I can actually see how that would be, because I think that my because I had seen the film so many times without reading the book and then started to read the book, the film was informed by the book as opposed to the film coming after the book and being a poor kind of cousin of the book. So for me, the film, which I loved and had loved from a time when it was one of very few films I had seen, because I was young when I saw it for the first time. So I didn't have this vast experience of film. So it was kind of there was still a novelty to watching that kind of film. And it was the first, I think, of these beautiful period pieces. And it was Merchant Ivory's first film.
Yes.
So, and they were of that time. They kind of became popular at that time, that sort of style of film. Watching it again now, the film, it came alive in a whole new way because I'd read the book. Suddenly, it was so much richer because I'd read the book. And I was able to just slide those things from the book and your discussion of the book, which was amazing. Go back and listen to that, everyone who's just listening to this. I was able to slide them in to my watching of the film, and it made it. I can see how the film just like didn't quite get there in some places, but on other levels, it just elevated the film for me. So I think it's because of the point from which you access it, and
that's the perfect relationship with adaptation if you can hit it. Like I feel that way about the Sense and Sensibility one so much. I loved the book, I loved the movie, and the two inform each other beautifully and just fill each other out to just an even better like end product. But it's a hard thing to do. I think that's why it fascinates me so much. And I think E.M. Forster specifically has so much rich and gorgeous prose. And it seemed like sometimes, and I think this happened in the Howard's End adaptation, they were able to plug in the dialogue in a way that maintained a sense of the prose in a way that I didn't feel that this film quite landed. And they gave some of my favorite lines to other people,
Yes.
And then a lot of
Thank
my
you.
other favorite lines were never said at all. Like that great one, we've been driven by lovers. The gods should envy us. And we never got that at all. Just kind of like, oh, leave them alone. And I was like, oh, I mean, that's fine too, but I feel like you're missing the point. Granted, they gave it to us differently because instead we get this beautiful golden-haired forlorn figure standing in the road. And it's obviously a crime against humanity and nature and all that is good. But I would have liked the line.
Yeah, I actually was. I was very aware of when Mr. Emerson's lines were taken away.
Yeah.
For your sake.
Yes. Thank you.
For my sake, I was actually, my big thing was that I was upset that the one about indelicacy and beauty.
Yes.
That was given to one of the Miss Allens. And I was very upset about that because for me, that was when I read the book. After reading it so long ago and after seeing the film so many times, like really struck me early on about how Lucy's a much more interesting character than I really had given her credit for in the past.
Yes.
So I want to bring up something that is interesting to me about this and made me realize when I rewatched, that maybe it isn't necessarily a movie for you, Liz, but is like, and I'm like, it's something I noticed, and I'm not even sure really, like, I just want to discuss it because I don't really have a strong opinion about it, but I thought it was really interesting. This definitely does feel like, Merchant and Ivory, like, kind of figuring out what their groove is, and they hadn't quite figured it. I mean, they get so good later on. And especially at romance, which is interesting because, like, it's like they kind of hit it here, but they also kind of don't. And
I want to put it out there that nothing you say will stop me from loving this film. Nor should it.
Right. Nothing I say will make me. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I can see 2 points in time at the same moment. 2 places here where one is like 16-year-old me and thereon who has just this unbelievably strong nostalgic experience of this film.
Yes.
And then me who talks about film. Okay. So like those 2 people can actually coexist. So yeah, the thing that I noticed as the second version of me that was interesting is the device that they use of the like the title cards and like the humorous titling even in the scenes. Like there's the one where it's like and so and so and so and so and so and so go on a drive to see a view. Italians drive them. And it was just really interesting because I think that they made this choice that almost feels like stage or a book or both. I mean, we know that this all ends up being written in the book.
Right.
In the Red Book that they very beautifully did have lying on the ground the way it was in the book, the Forrester book. So it was interesting. It's almost like they created this structure that made it feel like artifice. And so that is distancing. When you do that, then it's more about like, it's like, you're on a stage. It's like when we talked about with Baz Luhrmann, like although Baz Luhrmann is all like deep emotion, but still like this structure created an artifice that is structuring also the way you see it. Like I think that they made the choice to never let you completely sink in on an emotional level because you're always aware that you're watching this story.
And I think the performances were like that too, which can be distancing.
Yes, absolutely.
But for me, and that was something I made a note of, like Maggie Smith's performance is very arch and mannered, but so present and real. So she'll do this thing, but Lucy or Lucia, she'll do this, but she's still completely present. She's still in it. She's not. There's no giving away. She doesn't give it away as if it's a caricature. She's and so it's completely believable. Yeah. And I think that what I fell in love with, and I think that perhaps of its time, it was about entering this world. It was so different with these titles and this. It felt like you were seeing that world back, 100 and oh god, it's a long time now, but 100, so it felt like you were. It was embracing the period as well. It wasn't trying to make the period present which is what so many things stylistically do now. Now
right.
things try and make it real. They're trying to make it real. You know, we do the
Right,
things
so
that
it feels kind of gritty or like you're in the room.
and that
Okay.
you can
or they're tapping into the way we experience, like Black Sails does in a lot of ways. And I love that about Black Sails, is that Black Sails is telling you a period story, but like really tapping into the way we now in our time are going to emotionally experience that. And that's very appropriate to a book that is so much about the conflict between authenticity and authentic experience and making choices based on the societal expectations of a person, in particular of a woman. But like that is one of the biggest tensions in the book. And again, I don't know if I'm saying that the film succeeds or doesn't succeed. I just felt like it was an aspect of the story I noticed that I'd never noticed before, because it's not the way I looked at movies before. And so now it just really kind of like, it just struck me how much this felt like them saying, okay, we're telling you a story now, and we're going to give you snippets of the story, but we're not supposed to be, unlike with that Sense and Sensibility, we're not supposed to be in it. We're not supposed to be part of the story and really feeling their emotions, and we're not doing that thing where we're like, how would I feel?
Right. No, it does. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it feels theatrical. Like, especially those title cards has very much the sense of curtain closes, curtain opens again. Like you take a minute, you reach in your purse, you slip a mint in your mouth, you know, like there's
and and some winking, and there's like a lot of winking going on.
Yeah, I suppose so. That's very interesting.
Which Forrester, like we talked about that a lot when we were talking about the book. Like Forrester's brutal in the narrator's comedy / whatever comedic subtle digs or not so subtle digs at some of the characters.
Sure.
Interesting. Again, I don't know. I wish I had like a stronger opinion about this. Like it was like a thing I noticed. And this is where I think the nostalgic me is going to always limit the other me from being able to talk about this film, because it moves me so much. But it doesn't move me in that way. And again, their later films, a lot of them do move me that way. But it's not that thing where you're like, I'm never swept up. Like I'm watching them kiss, and I'm very aware of like how different the two kisses are, but in neither of them am I like, I'm aware of the beauty. I think Louise and I have different experience of this. I'm not Lucy Honeychurch in that scene, in either of those scenes. I don't think.
But that second kiss where Cecil has just read and he runs after her up the stairs and he grabs her and she kisses him back. Oh my God, you weren't moved by that.
No, I'm not saying I'm not moved. I'm saying that I'm not Lucy.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm moved as like a third party.
Which I think is important. Maybe that might be a choice. And this is so interesting to me. And I'm fascinated to hear what you think about this, Louise, is because, Helena Bonham Carter's 19 playing this role. Like, she's a child. So I don't know how much she is really, like, cognitively doing these things and how much someone is saying this is how it should feel and she's just performing to the director. But that's so true to Lucy Honeychurch, is that Lucy's not present in that moment. She is so saying, no, this is not me. This is not my life. So you can see her kind of sink into it a bit, and then the literal push away as she sees that Cecil is coming, that reality is, imposing itself back in on her. And I thought the really interesting choice about the kisses for me, I was not wild about the first kiss on the meadow either. I wanted to be. I don't know why it misses for me. I don't know why. It feels clumsy, and maybe that's important.
No,
that's part of it.
It is important.
Right? Because it's just young and youthful and like bodies colliding.
Right. And she's having such a hard time walking before that, which I really love, because she's very graceful, but she's like really like, so, you watch her trying to go down that slope, and she's like really having a hard time with her footing. And that in contrast to the way he goes towards her, which again, it's all bungled. It's all right. It's just like, they're just stupid kids who don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yes.
but his forceful way of walking through the barley, I know it's not barley in the book, but in here it's barley, like his forceful way of walking through the barley because he's swept up with, like, you feel him on this wave of his emotion. Again,
right.
I am aware that now that I am seeing it from the outside, but I'm also very aware of what's going on with each of them.
Yes.
So she's like literally teetering because she is not on her correct footing. She doesn't know what to do with herself.
Sure.
She has spent every moment up until that point basically lying. Like we always said, like, I love the moment where she says to Mr. Emerson, like, I consider myself very lucky. I'm very satisfied and I'm having a wonderful time. And she could not look more miserable when she says that. So it's just this nuance. It's so beautifully contrasted. And then, and it is. It's so awkward, and I love it for being awkward because I feel like so much, especially period drama, is so concerned with, like, I mean, not that the framing of this and the visuals aren't beautiful, but like so concerned with the actual first kiss being this picturesque thing, which is just
polished and the music swells, and,
exactly,
sure.
And just and just visually also, like, people who've never kissed anyone before, which is generally how these short stories should be, like,
true.
Right?
Like, it's weird at first. You don't quite know where to put your nose. Yeah, that's interesting.
Teeth bang.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right.
I feel like the idea of just like a wet collision of faces. Yes.
Just kind of what it is.
Well, and that's what, which brings me back to what I wanted to talk about, which is the adaptive choice that they made the first time that Lucy and Cecil kiss. Because, of course, we get none of Cecil's interiority at all. So we don't get all of his lovely bits about how, you know, he's disappointed by the kiss because he wanted it to be passionate, but it wasn't. So instead, we get Lucy trying to make it passionate like that kiss she shared with George out in the fields, and his glasses are askew, and he's just like, oh God, that was, so much, yes, okay, well. And the kind of awkwardness that flows after that, which was reminiscent a bit of, Dangerous Liaisons, it doesn't really matter, but anyway, but this idea that she should.
What a movie we have to talk about someday.
Yes. Actually.
Yeah, we do.
Another big one, right? Another.
Oh my God.
Oh, Michelle Pfeiffer with the vein in her forehead pulsing as she says, oh.
Okay, see, and I've been talking to other friends about Grease too all the time. I just really want to do a Michelle Pfeiffer, like, film festival.
Okay. Yes. Down for that.
I love that woman a lot. Okay.
But just quickly back to the adaptation and the sense that it's falling. I mean, maybe this is not the right time to talk about it, but the fact that your sense was that it doesn't give the richness. For me, I was watching the film, having read part of the book, and going, I am so in awe of Ruth Power Jabala's ability to turn this book, which is about prose, and his words are so beautiful. How do you turn that into a picture?
Yes.
And I was kind of in awe of how they did that.
Okay, well, tell me then can you tell me some of what you thought was the most effective things that she did, and the things that moved you the most, that you thought were like the strongest choices?
I think that I mean, when it first occurred to me was when we first meet George Emerson at the dining table, and he turns his plate to her with the question mark on it.
Yes.
And then in the bedroom,
which is not in the book, right?
No, and there's the question mark on the picture, in the back of the picture. Like, those were things that showed where George was at, which you can't do because you don't have the prose. So you have to find a visual way, and that was done in that way. The fact that the in the book, I mean, I was shocked to see how short that first kiss scene is. The description of it is like it's half a page. It's half a page in the book,
really,
and yet it is. It as the movie, it's kind of this. I mean, you've got the music going, and like, it actually is the music going. But it's just, and the view, and it's huge. That scene is huge in the movie, and yet in the book it is tiny. But the description, I mean, he uses the words. I mean, it's all about. It's about the blue flowers, right? It's all about blue flowers. And of course, there are none of those. But just the description, how do you turn a description that is, if you'll excuse me, but never again were they in such profusion. This terrace was the wellhead, the primal source whence beauty gushed out to water the earth. I mean, how do you put that in a picture?
Oh my God. I don't think I quite realized how insanely sexual that is.
Didn't you? Yeah.
I must have, but like suddenly now, I mean, it's just Louise reading it. I think that's what it is.
So it's that. And then George turned at the sound of her arrival. For a moment he contemplated her as one who had fallen out of heaven. He saw radiant joy in her face. He saw the flowers beat against her dress in blue waves. He stepped quickly forward and kissed her. That's it. Yes.
I love it.
You're right.
I love it.
Yeah.
But the moment was because it was such an important moment, and your discussion about views just so informed. I mean, I was like, oh my God, how could I have not got that before? You know, because it is.
I didn't
views.
either.
Right. Crazy, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all about her stepping from the bushes where everything is brown and she's kind of trying to get through the bushes and she steps out and it's just,
yeah.
And I don't know. For me, that was a really extraordinary translation of the book into a visual.
Yes. I think I would agree that was probably my favorite. And I do like that they didn't try to be so literal and specific. Like initially when they changed it from violets to cornflowers, I was like, why would you do this? I don't like that. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You could get your hands on cornflowers and violets drip and you can't hold them or they're we just, look, we're working in the heat and we need something that's going to be a little more sturdy. Okay, that works. That's fine. But the fact that they even changed it in the later reading of Miss Lavish's novel to be a field of barley and red poppies. I mean, it's just as evocative. It's just as thrilling. The point is that the surprise of color and like the lushness of the vegetation and just everything around just was striking and that you couldn't forget. Like that was the important thing. The important thing is that you couldn't forget. What the flower was is less important. But I do think that was gorgeously done, as was, I would argue, better in the film. I think the film, the visual of the man dying on the piazza worked
so beautifully done.
So much better in the film.
Yeah.
For me, the first time I was listening through the audiobook on campus and suddenly Lucy has fainted and I was like, oh, I missed something. So I'm like backing up 30 seconds. Because it just didn't quite. And then a man, and then he lurched forward and then he was dead and then they carted him away, which just doesn't.
No, this is haunting.
This
actually literally
like
haunted
me for years. The flash of red and the bright, lurid blue eyes was shocking. It was gorgeously done.
What the film decided to do, which is I think what all good adaptations have to do, is choose one or two storylines to follow.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There's a richness to the book that they can never reproduce in a film. So they chose very specifically to follow the journey of Lucy and George, peppered with the environment or the world in which they lived. And they had to make that moment in the piazza big because it's George saying something has happened.
Right.
Something has happened. And so it had to be something. Like it had to be.
Yes. Right. And we don't get that, again, the interiority of, how she felt swinging in his arms and a man had held her. Like, we don't get that. So we need more spectacle.
Right. We're losing all of Lucy's, like, her interiority during that phase of the book, which is relatively short, is fascinating because you do watch her get swept up and you watch her, like her in her own thoughts. You watch her like push it all down and make it go away. And so they gave her a few lines like that they altered from it, but you really had to, they needed that to have the same importance for her because he is in the book as well vocal about the importance for him, but you miss later on when she's thinking back to it and she's like scared that he had understood what had happened, even if she wasn't sure that she had, like all of that conversation later on about what that moment meant for her is something we can't have. Because, obviously they couldn't like stick in a person for Lucy to talk to about it because that would be the opposite of what Luciani Church
That's
would
right.
do.
Yeah, we can't have Lucy do that. No, that's a very good point.
So yeah, like Forster could get away with these moments where Lucy did have a little bit of introspection and clarity about herself in the book, because we could watch her over and over again, have that moment and then choose to not see it again, and then have that moment and then choose to not see it again. But in a movie, if she was going to have that moment of clarity, that's what would have stuck with you.
Yeah.
The idea that she was actually being introspected.
Yeah. And I think what often happens with adaptations is that the writer tries to turn the prose into language, into conversation, into dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels clunky.
Yes.
And I don't know whether it's because I know the film so well and then read the book, but I felt like the reading of when you know the book and you watch the film, it informs the choices. So that moment where she's asked the driver to show her where George is, and where the good men are.
Right. I know.
And she comes out and it's not the good man she wanted. And there's a moment where she looks at the driver like, oh, wrong ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment passes without really noticing it if you just watch the film. But having read the book, it means something. And I found many moments like that where, having read the book, it informed the film. And I think that those are the jewels that the reader gets given in an adaptation when they watch a film. It's like, oh, that's that moment. Oh, they did it. They didn't.
Yes.
It's not there for everyone to see if they don't know the book, but it's there.
Yeah.
If you know the book. So I think that there were lots of those, which I liked.
That almost feels like one of those things where, like, maybe they once upon a time did have that bit of dialogue, like where maybe they had that moment where she asked the driver for the good man and he brought her to the wrong one, but that the nonverbal moment of the acting served the same purpose, so they were able to cut that out.
Yes. Which I tend to prefer. Like, I say this all the time when I'm complaining about voiceover in adaptation. It's like, if the actress is doing it on her face, please don't tell me over in the dialogue. Like, that's just insulting to my intelligence, and it's taking me out of the moment. This is what interests me so much about adaptation, is like what you try to convert from the prose visually and what you try to put into the lines and into the dialogue. Can I ask you, Louise, as someone who loves the book and the movie and is a performer, about the performances for Lucy and George and how you feel about them in this film?
So I think that it's very difficult for me to separate out my first experience of those characters that I got from the film with what they are in the book. So when I read the book, I was imagining those people, playing those parts.
Sure.
So it becomes difficult to have a separate vision of them. I was shocked that George was described in the book as being so sort of morose and kind of depressed in the book. When in the film, it then informed how I saw him in the film, because it kind of made him make more sense in the film.
Sure. I don't see how he makes sense to people without the book in the film, because it's such a strong art.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I think I was just less critical when I watched it as a film. When my opinion of the film and of the characters was cemented for me, I was in a much less critical sort of phase. I was much more willing to just get swept up in all of it. As I said before, with Lucy's thought processes being informed by what you read in the book, I felt that a lot, and I think that it added a richness to her performance that I hadn't noticed before. And I think if you just see the film, I mean, I didn't have a problem with it, and as I say, my feeling about the film was cemented a long time ago. So it's very difficult to be critical of them. I don't know how to add more than that, except that I do feel that they must have read the book as actors, and that for me, the choices that they made were very much informed by the richness of the book.
Okay.
So because as an actor, you create a backstory for yourself, and it's what a joy to have a backstory like Ian Forster provides you. That a lot of that stuff is never going to be on the screen, but you've got it. You've been given it. And it's so rich and so good and so borne out by the way the story unfolds. And I feel like they had that. They had been given that, they knew it, and it informed their performances. That's what I like to think anyway.
Good. No, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I'd say, and I find, again, also probably informed by, having seen the film before reading the book. Yeah. Not that much before. Like, I saw the film the first time when I was 16 and then read the book when I was, 19, 20. But this time I was very struck at how much I like movie George better. I think I find movie George charming. Mm-hmm. He's flirtatious. Yes. I just feel like Julian Sands did a really good job of filling George out. And I mean, remember in the last podcast, I was just like, do we really, like, are we happy for Lucy? Like, sure. We decided we were in the end because they were happy and we believed it. But I was just like, George, we had agreed that his father's much more interesting than he is. I find movie George to be kind of a weirdo, but a charming weirdo.
Like a roguish charm, like an impish charm, maybe.
I mean, yeah. I still always like crack up at his like when he's like in the tree and he's like screaming beauty and stuff, like, because that's not George. That is not Book George.
It was very weird for me.
Nope.
That part was weird for me. I was wondering if we were going to get to that.
It's weird. Super weird. It is very, very weird, and I love it.
It works for film George, but it's so not Book George that I was just like, what are we doing?
But he is saying those things. In the book, he does say, courage, love. So how is he doing that? The movie gave us a way for him to be doing that, fit with the story they were telling. But how was he doing it in the book? How did you, as reading?
Now I'm trying to remember. I guess I just thought of it. It was literally screaming from the treetops. What does it say?
Yeah.
You still got it right there?
It says, courage, cried her companion, now standing some 6 feet above. Courage and love. So he is
doing it, huh?
Yeah,
so he definitely was.
He's just a crazy weirdo. See, I just loved it when I was 16 and I was, like deep into my love of the beatniks and this. And we were, I mean, I guess this was the part I talked about myself as a traveler when I was in my, in my mid-20s. But like, I was totally that kid. Like, I was the person who was just trying to find every way to, like, I know, not the me that you're familiar with.
I was going to say, I'm delighted by this. Tell me more. Yes.
Oh, yeah. No, I was that person. I would, like, we would go out in the woods and not scream things. But, we were just, we were, like, super into, like, how do we get in touch with these deep feelings? And,
that's gorgeous.
Jack Kerouac was my dude. I mean, not a great guy when it comes to women, but totally a great guy when it comes to like just being a weirdo for experience.
Yeah. See, and I was like the Anne of Green Gables type who's like walking through the woods, reciting, the romantic poets and knowing the highwaymen by heart. And yes.
I was walking through the woods, but like trying to like feel the woods.
Sure. Yes.
That's who I was.
What about you, Louise?
Whatever the hell that means.
I was more like you, Liz. I was more I wanted to be the courage, love person, but I wasn't. I was a lot more restricted and held by what I thought I should be. And then I think, God, informed by Lucy Honeychurch, I probably had a demureness about me that I felt was appropriate, that was at odds with who I really was, which then resulted in me seeming surly.
She does seem surly in the film, which really surprised me.
In the book also. Remember I said in the book, like, I like it when she gets a little, I think I said petulant. Like she...
Yes. And to me in the book it read sassy, which I saw as kind of like a feistiness that I liked. In the film it came out as quite surly, and and Helena Bonham Carter just has that. So much of her face is in the bottom half. That's a strange thing to say, but like she just is always. She seems pursed and in concentration, and then those wild big eyes. So it's some of that I feel like was just the way that she does facial expression, but some of it was in her tone as well. I
mean, my God, if you were stuck traveling with Charlotte Bartlett, what on earth? What else would you do?
Yeah.
I suppose that's true.
My God, I would go crazy. Like that's Charlotte Bartlett is so annoying.
For all that Lucy is good at like shutting out her own feelings and what she's thinking, she can't shut other people out. She hears everything that other people say and she filters it all and tries to decide. And she really tries not to filter it. She tries to just take it all and accept it all as what is true, which I think is part of what makes her so tragic in the beginning, is that she's just not deciding for herself. It's what makes her speech finally when she says, you know, I want to, well, just be free and independent and know my own mind, I suppose, why that becomes so important for her there in the end. Meanwhile, I'm falling in love with young Louise as I'm thinking about it. It's just like this. I feel you, girl. I feel you. Yes.
I don't think I was very lovable. I think I was, oh my God, no, I don't think I was, yeah. That's another discussion.
Yeah, young me is definitely not really represented in this film. I mean, maybe George, not really. Young me doesn't exist in this film. Young me exists in other Forrester stories.
Sure. That's true. Yeah, you were there in Howard's End pretty clearly for us.
Yes, I think if I remember correctly, I'm also there in Where Angels Fear to Tread, which is much broader, bigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I had a long time in Lucy Honeychurch years. So, yeah, about a decade of my life spent there. So...
it's interesting. I mean, and I like actually her depiction, you know, what you were saying, Liz, about her facial expressions makes so much sense. Like, it works as muddled and not in like a different, I think it would be easy for someone to hear the word muddled or read the word muddled in the book and like go with like bewildered
I was just thinking that.
Or you know what I mean? Like, and that's not what she did with it. And I feel like the way that Helena Bonham Carter played Lucy, you feel the weight, because the muddled isn't about being confused exactly. The muddled has to do with the weight of expectations.
Well, and stubbornness, I think, too.
Right.
She plays
absolutely.
stubborn
all of that
very much, which I quite like.
I really liked it because it felt like a more interesting interpretation of what muddled could be. And especially because if she was just bewildered, we would have sympathy for her. And we're supposed to, when Mr. Emerson tells her, you know, you've been lying to everyone, we're supposed to also, you know, get that. We're not supposed to just feel bad for Lucy. We're supposed to be a little like, dude, what did you expect? Like,
yes.
This is a choice you've been making. Like, she has more agency than just some young girl who's like put upon and confused. She has made choices. Those choices come from the limitations of gender and her situation and all of these things. So it's not like she's making choices because she's bad, but she's making irresponsible choices when trying to deal with the weight of the world upon her.
Yeah.
And so she has agency, and therefore we can criticize her in addition to feeling for her. And I feel like, you know, whatever, how old was she? 19? Like, very, very young Helena Bonham Carter got that. Like, somehow.
Yeah. And that muddledness is about, it's, you know, muddled, it's because words change in their application and their meaning. Muddled does sound like a little bit confused, and it's kind of a light thing. Whereas in this context, it was very much about the struggle that she was feeling between what was expected of her and what she was feeling and who she wanted to be in the world, like what she wanted from her life and what her life was being, how it was being played out, and this sense of being carried along and trying to decide whether it was appropriate or okay to stop where her life was taking her, where society wanted her life to take her, and what she wanted for her life.
Right.
And within that, feeling safe in where society was taking her life. But not sure if she wanted to not feel safe. Like, it's quite amazing to not feel safe. And am I brave enough? Am I brave enough to not feel safe and go with this thing? So it's that learning to listen to intuition that is killed by society. And I think that's what I mean. I'm overlaying my stuff, which I think is what
that's what we all do.
That's what makes art what it is. Yes,
it's what it makes us do. It gives us an opportunity to experience ourselves through someone else's story and create and elucidate it and enlighten us. So I think that was what I identified with with Lucy. And as you say, I think she did a really good job of that that real grappling, that kind of, and the weight is a good word, because I think there was a sense of the weight.
Especially when we contrast it with the very last facial expression that we get before we close and go to like the denouement and go down to our end, where she's just radiant, like the tears are still on her face, but she's radiantly happy and beautiful. Yes, especially right after we got that line from Miss Allen saying she didn't seem like a bride. She lacked radiance, and there she is, just glowing and alive.
Yeah, beautiful. And at the same time, very vulnerable, just like totally exposed, right? Just no artifice, just like, I'm ready.
Right. And we never had the only other moment, actually, I wanted to bring this up because this is interesting, because I feel like it's very different than the way the book treated the Italy part, is when George comes in after the kiss and after the rain and all of that. He comes in and they chose to have Lucy smile at him right, that you got to see Lucy like brighten up when he comes in, and then Charlotte
so quickly
literally pushes her out of the way, slams the door on her, and then talks to him. Whereas in the book, they're both in their rooms, and Lucy had considered talking to him, but that Charlotte beat her to it. But just that moment of that bright look on her face, for me, was very important. Because,
and her hair down.
Right. Because again, in the book, we understand how conflicted she is because we have her thoughts. We don't have that in the film. So that moment was really important, because otherwise the portion in England would make so much less sense, because it would be so easy to decide that he kissed her and she wasn't into it, and that like this was just this horrible thing that happened to her.
Right.
And that one moment, and it's the other time that we see her face look like that, have that openness, that one moment, it was all we needed to understand going into the England part, that she was, when she heard about him being there, that she was conflicted. She wasn't just angry about him being there. I mean, angry at Cecil, whatever. That's a different story. But that when they're going off to church and she seems so disturbed, it's because she knows that she's going to have to be in the same place as George.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's another moment. You asked for moments, Liz, that the writer, that Ruth Jabala did such a good job, and I think that's one of them, to give that moment, because like you say, Daphne, it makes it all make sense,
Right.
Yeah, you need that connective tissue. Yeah.
Right. You need to understand that Lucy isn't just angry at him, that she is actually conflicted, or you lose everything that's important about the next portion, which is 2/3 of the film.
Yeah, but the angry is about society. The angry is about society. It's about what society wants it to be. It's not about what actually was lit within her.
Yeah.
Well, right. And just discomfort. Like she's just like, I think we all know that situation where it's just like, I mean, not necessarily that situation, but like a situation where it's like there's something that you're kind of excited about, but you really don't know how you're going to navigate it.
Yes.
And it's also really dangerous for you. And you're just like that when they go off to church, and we've seen the book already. We don't know, if you haven't read the book, you don't know what that red book is, but we've seen the book to remind us that like what we're coming up to. And you see her face, and I just feel like, again, she did this great job of just like, you just feel all of the weight of all of this circumstance on her at that moment. And she's trying to navigate it, but she's still muddled. Yeah, it's really gorgeous. We've managed to go this long without talking about either Cecil, and we need to talk about the swimming hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
That's where the director comes in. That's where who directed the film shows itself very, very clearly.
Like, hi, I'd like to have some naked men frolicking now. Thank you very much.
Why the hell not?
Which let me say, that scene was definitely, when I saw it the first time in censored apartheid South Africa, did not have all the penises it actually had in my more recent two watchings.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It had none of the penises. There were no penises ever.
Oh, we had penises and balls and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which you really do just never see. Like, you never see that. There was something, and Oh my God, I'm just realizing what a great adaptive choice that is too, because of all that great stuff we get about how until we have put shame behind us, again, going back to
Right?
sales again, I can't help ourselves. But anyway, like until we put shame behind us, especially with women, but with everyone, that will never, what is it, enter the garden, I think is
Enter
the
the
phrase.
garden. That's what Mr. Emerson says. Yeah.
Beautiful. So to just make it normal, just to make it natural.
Right. And like not pose at all. Like that moment when you see Simon Cowell like trying to climb out of there and you're just like, it's just like, yep, that's what a dude looks like when he's trying really hard to climb out of.
Yep.
Like,
we're not trying to make this super sexy.
It's all there.
It's just,
this is not right. It is not sexy. It is not. Sorry, Simon Cowell, you're wonderful. I adore you. This was my introduction to him, and I have loved him ever since.
And part of why we love Mr. Beebe, right? Because it's Simon Callow. We love Mr. Beebe because Simon Callow just made him so wonderful.
Yeah, right. And calling back to our last podcast episode, why ultimately I'm very angry about Mr. Beebe, because I always get drawn in and think he's this great guy, and then I'm like, wait a minute, and you didn't care about Lucy at all.
Yeah,
but yes, it is. It's I realize now how much that is informed by Simon Cowell, because I adore him and I adore him as this character. I know he is. Yes. Speaking of people like Liz and I always talk about people we would want to hang out with. I would like to hang out with Simon Cowell.
There you go. Yeah.
And he was an Outlander, and it's like plays this bad dude, and I'm like, I don't care. It's Simon Cowell. I want to hang out with him.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Have you read his autobiography?
No. Oh my God.
Read it.
Okay.
Yeah, will do. Going to buy right after this.
She will too.
I will too.
She'll text you tomorrow. Well, I just finished it, and bling, 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 bling.
We're doing a podcast on Simon Cowell in the book.
Oh my God.
Anyway, you were saying, you were talking about how
the shame and the garden.
Yes, penises, natural thing. We should see more of them, is I think where we were going with this. Yes.
Yes, we should. I mean, it's funny. It is true.
Well, just like more desexualized nudity, I think, is always something that is always, I don't know if important is the right word. Maybe it is.
No, important.
I think important is the right word. It's just an important thing. Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like in general, film and television has done a great job of not covering, that's a bad word for this context, but like
misrepresenting.
Well, no, that's not the word I want. It's funny. I just keep every word that comes to my head. It starts like, I'm like, okay, that sounds like I'm trying to like make some sort of sexual innuendo about this. Film and television has, I don't know. I'm just like anticipating Liz making me blush. Is what's happening,
darling.
Has explored all sorts of aspects of humanity, except that, like, yes, sex, yes, sexuality, yes, all sorts of emotional things, but yes, sometimes we're just naked people.
Yes. But it's also it's not just film. It's life. It's everything.
Right.
Right.
Fair enough. Fair
enough.
enough.
You don't see normal naked bodies. You only see naked bodies if they're worthy. The worthy the bodies we see naked are the gorgeous, toned, young, idealized bodies. We don't see real bodies.
Right. That's true.
That is a good point, too. Yeah, I'm loving all of the different campaigns that we're seeing. Target's doing a campaign, and Third Love is doing a campaign, and Aerie, I think, from Aeropostale, are doing campaigns that are just like all body types. Dove did it however many years ago, so we're starting to push through it, but it's still incredibly noticeable when someone's doing it that they're the only ones doing it, which means that we've only begun. Yeah.
In the context of the film, the fact that you have these men naked and playing and frolicking and just kind of totally getting into it, and along comes Lucy and her mother and Cecil, and they're up to
collars up to here,
yes, and parasols, and Cecil sort of beating away through the bushes, which is again this view thing, right? The views. He's wonderful. He's taking them into this covered bushes as opposed
interesting.
He's battling with nature.
The glade of the secret pond, of the secret lake, which is more of a puddle, really.
Sacred. Sacred, right? It's sacred. That's
lake.
What's the sacred lake, which does go back to this thing of the garden, and the thing that Lucy said that she used to go to until she was found out
Yes, right. Chef kiss, says Louise Barnes. Yes. Yeah, no, it's perfect.
Yes,
wow.
It is so perfect. And yeah, it's just great. I mean, it's funny. I guess I grew up with a lot of nudity because child of hippies.
I did not. The first time I saw a naked person was my grandmother when I'd graduated high school.
Wow.
Yeah. There was no nudity when I was growing up.
Wow. So yeah. So for me, I don't even think, it's funny. I don't think 16-year-old me even noticed.
Wow.
I mean, noticed because it's a fun scene and awesome. And like, you know, I definitely also had a thing for Julian's hands, but it was just like,
yeah, sure.
Okay. So the thing that we need to talk about is Cecil.
Yes. I think the adaptation showed very, very clearly, especially because we had a slightly more exuberant George than we did in the book. But just the sharp contrast between these two men. And I think Daniel Day-Lewis is, God, exceptional, right? Just so...
He's an okay actor.
You guys all right.
He'll do.
Yeah, no, when he first comes out, he seems very stuffy, which of course the character is, but it feels like a caricature at first.
Yes.
But when he begins to you begin to see the things beneath the surface, you begin to see his insecurities. And of course, when we get the scene where she breaks off the engagement, by the end of it, I'm much like in the book. I have a lot of compassion for Cecil, and God, it's gorgeously portrayed.
The shoes, right? Sitting on the steps.
Oh my God. That's what I was going to say. The attention to detail like that. Yeah. That man, he can act the shit out of most things. Although this was very early in his career. I meant to look. Like the first time I saw him was in My Beautiful Laundrette, which I believe is before this.
Yeah.
I believe so.
I saw him first in My Left Foot, I think. That was probably the nice.
Which is definitely after this.
Yeah. No, I saw him first in this, but I didn't recognize it as him. You know,
of course, sure.
And he became Daniel Day-Lewis with.
See, I'm not sure. Yeah, I feel like I saw My Beautiful Laundrette first, which I don't know if either of you have seen. It's a very weird, wonderful, independent, small film where he plays this like street kid in London who is gay, and like his crew is you know, kind of racist crew, and he ends up falling in love with a Pakistani guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I should watch that now. I've attempted to watch it a few times over the years, but yeah.
It's very raw. It's very like independent, low budget film in the 80s feeling. Just like, that's a mood. That's like, that is a thing.
When I have more time, we have to do Age of Innocence because...
Oh, no, we are doing that. Edith Wharton is waiting for us. All of these other authors are just like, have existed so that we could talk about Edith Wharton.
Fabulous. Okay.
I love that woman a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, because she's like women's literature, but dark.
Oh, sure. Like she's your first Margaret Atwood, of course.
She's perfect for me. She's like, when you take all these tropes, but it doesn't work out.
Because it's being written by a woman, right?
Right.
Male. Well, like, this is how we experienced it.
Yep, exactly.
Leonardo.
Yes. Exactly. Oh, see, now that was also interesting. I loved that this was like, they plucked that out of Cecil's thoughts and stuck it into Lucy's mouth, and it worked.
It did. Yeah. Well, and it was tying back to what George had just said, but was also something new. So it was her own original thought, which was so important, because if she had just parroted the words back, that doesn't mean anything to us. But the fact that you can tell that whatever George said sunk in, and she started deliberating, she started thinking about it, and coming up with her own thoughts, and yes, making those connections was so important. That was a beautiful piece of adaptation as well.
Right. That's like in the book. I feel like I should know better how that worked out in the film. Like that moment that I love in the book where George is quoting his father's his father's outlook on views. And then he's like saying, yeah, that's really cool. And this is mine. Like it's that same kind of thing. Like George's characters have more depth than I don't remember if that ended up in the film properly. Like it so moved me in the book where you're not remembering that.
I am remembering. It's just that my
was it in the film? Was it in the film?
He said, "My father says that the only good view is the sky above." The end.
He quotes his father. I don't think the part there, George, or the part about like it being crowds and groups of people and groups
none of
of
that
trees.
makes it.
So it's just like one. That's for me possibly
gets
my
really,
favorite moment.
It's interesting because like in some ways we get like this more exuberant George, that's got more of this like roguish charm thing going on, but he does not get very much dialogue.
Nope.
Which might be for reasons, but I don't love it. And they didn't give him dialogue because the dialogue he gives is kind of wooden and I don't even know what, just like half-assed, like
but
reading off a piece of paper.
Lucy.
He looks it. No, he's sexy. I get it. Like I get why she wants to roll in the hay with him. I get it. But when he's trying to give the speech and he's like sitting at the edge of the desk, he's got like his chin propped up. It's like, oh, but this man, you can't tell me this man. I don't know. It didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, but he is actually good with the face stuff. Like the moment where Cecil is reading to them and they're both
it was sexy. Yes.
No, but it's not just sexy. Like it's also like you can see like, I mean, she is a better actor than he is by far. Like she goes through a lot more emotions in that small span of time of Cecil reading that bit about their kiss.
But that wasn't dialogue.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's like he maybe is just bad at saying words, but really good at like facial expressions.
For
he's
me,
good at face acting.
Yes. For me, this film works beautifully on mute. Or I know this is horrible. I'm sorry. I'm not even drinking.
Wait, for everyone?
It's just coming.
For everyone or just Julian Sands? I know you're saucy. I love it.
Definitely Julian Sands, mostly Helena Bonham Carter, not Daniel Day-Lewis, who is lovely. No, and I love Dame Judi Dench and Dame Maggie Smith. They're both.
Oh my God, I know. Don't you want just a whole movie of the two of them wandering around the streets of Florence?
Yeah. Yes. I do, though. I do. I want that very much. Yeah. They become lovers in. Yes.
Now that would be an interesting story.
There you go.
An interesting complementary pair.
No, mostly it's just those two. I think that's why I asked early on in the episode what
right.
Well, y'all thought of the two of them, because they just don't. I don't see them having any chemistry, and they both do interesting things sometimes. It's just.
But you see, there's that moment. This again is where the writing comes in. The writing of the adaptation comes in. You know, that moment where she puts out her Macintosh squares and she puts them down. They sit on them and they're having this conversation. And the conversation is about, so what did she really? And then Lucy goes, wait, did she marry? Yes, she married the Italian, and he was 10 years younger than her. Yeah. That is not in the book. That is not in the book. But it's a way of showing how Eleanor Lavish was. That Mrs. Bartlett had that desire in her. She had that need, and there was the thing about what does she say? It's a beautiful word that she uses when she speaks about what men are, or I remember. This view reminds me of it sometime in back in her youth.
Right,
that isn't in the book.
Nope.
And for me, it connected with your thing of views.
That she was able to see Once Upon a Time, and
Miss Emerson's thing about all views are, it doesn't matter what the view is, because for her, this gorgeousness of Italy, for her it was some place in England.
Oh, interesting. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
and that this thing had happened. She had obviously had something happen to her.
That's her version of screaming beauty from a tree.
Yeah, or some interaction she had, which is why later on she can listen to George saying in the Lucy line to George. She can be witness to that and be going, no, Lucy, you're making a mistake. Give him a chance. This is it. You want this, Which I don't know if that plays out in the book because I didn't get that far, but it allows you as the viewer of the film, not knowing the book, to see Mrs. Bartlett's progression, see her journey.
Which we so need, because she can be just so detestable otherwise. But you need to see, I think, how much that she is repressed. And
you have the mom saying to Lucy, like, you're being like a Charlotte. Like that's in the book, that is played out through the whole book. This idea that, that we never get the details of, but you do. You have this sense that Charlotte once had a crossroads like this, and she chose propriety.
Right. She chose to close the shutters. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. She chose to close the shutters and not see the view, and hide herself from view. And so you really get the sense, and in the film they put in just enough bits for you to understand the end. that you're not surprised by Charlotte's choice. And in the film, I do like, actually, this was one of my questions for Liz, was like, how do we feel about this choice to have Charlotte? So just, Louise, just so you know, since you didn't get to the end of the book, in the book, there is actually, it's not clear that Charlotte was instrumental in getting Lucy into that room with Mr. Emerson. And it's actually a conversation that she and George have at the very end where she's like, I can't imagine Charlotte making that choice. And he's like, well, my dad told me that he saw her. So, I believe him. Why would he say that if it didn't happen? Whereas in the film, you have this whole scene between Charlotte and Mr. Emerson. And so, yeah, Liz, how do you feel? I feel really good about it. How do you feel about it?
I liked the choice because okay. Let me put it this way. The choice worked for me. It did do the same thing that you need the book to do.
Right.
And again, maybe in the hands of a different performer, we could have gotten that. What was one of George's most lovely speeches, I think, was there in the end when they were in Italy. And he says to her, I think that on some level, Charlotte must have always wanted us to be together because think about how seeing us haunted her. Like she carried it with her. She couldn't get away from us. And that would have been just as effective, I think. But this certainly, I mean, it worked for making us connect to Charlotte, which I think, again, was important. So
it was very important.
Yeah.
And to have that character have a journey, to be able to see that character's journey.
Mm-hmm. Which they didn't have to do. Like if they wanted to focus just on Lucy and George and somewhat Cecil, then we didn't necessarily need to do that. But it added a great level of just richness and also kind of seeing what it is that Lucy's escaping, like what.
Right. I think it's important for
be.
Lucy as well. It is important. You have to. You can't see Charlotte just as a contrast. You have to see her as somewhat of a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And to have her only serve as a cautionary tale isn't interesting. So to give her the role of cautionary tale, but also have her own story be rich and interesting was the correct choice.
Yeah. And to have her redeemed, because she was redeemed by that act. She's
right. Well, and that goes back to I love what you said, Louise, about the way Maggie Smith, that she's playing, almost at the same time a caricature, but with this kind of current underneath of all this rich, very real feeling emotion,
sincerity.
And I think that is exactly what's going on with Daniel Day-Lewis and Cecil, is that he it's almost like he exists on two levels. Cecil, you can just be super amused by the caricature, and he's definitely playing that. He is playing for the back rows, with all of his hand motions and his craziness. It's so much fun. But there are then those quiet moments, with him and with his shoes, where it's just wow, this is such a real person. And this is this is something I think most people know about Daniel Day-Lewis, is that he is this
method actor. Yeah.
But it works for him. He leverages that to all of the places it should take us. And maybe it's the most important that the two strongest actors of the main cast are the ones who play the characters that it would be easy just to decide are annoying or despicable.
Well, and it has to be so hard we get these wonderful books that you're supposed to read. You can read them when you're that age, but you're not going to get it. You get it when you read it 10, 20 years down the road, when you're past that and you can understand kind of what's happening when you're not stuck in Lucy's,
when you're not muddled.
When you're not muddled, exactly. When you're not muddled and closing shutters, exactly.
Or less muddled, let's say.
Yeah, or even just up in the treetop shouting, having no idea how the world actually works. Thank you, George.
Right.
So, yeah.
Or how branches work.
When he's in the lake too, and he tries to climb up, sort of, and then just decides, I'm done with this game now. What are you doing? That's funny. Yes. Oh God. Anyway, but I imagine that's got to be very difficult too, as a director, finding actors who look age appropriate, but can tell you the story. Because you have to, in some extent, just we're not in at least Lucy's point of view necessarily when we're reading A Room with a View, because we get so much Ian Forster walking us through everything that's happening. But that's harder to do on screen when you're tied so closely to somebody and you don't get any interiority like that. You're just watching their actions. You have to do there's a lot of work that has to go on around them, I suppose, to see the point that we're getting at.
Right. The other characters
they have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Yeah. They're creating an environment for, what we think of as our leads. They're creating a lot of environment for them to play off of, for us to understand them.
That's so interesting.
I know. Louise is like shaking her head. She's like, yeah, I know this shit because I actually do this stuff.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll get to our favorite things. But
I know. And I do have to mention that you actually, the person you most often acted against is Maggie Smith's son, who seems to be their like a genetic thing they've got going on where they can act and be expressing like multiple layers of things going on at the same time.
Yeah. Very thoughtful, very present, very intelligent portraying of character.
Yeah, nuance. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Toby Stephens also not so bad.
Poor Ginger.
We like him. Alrighty. So, I did not look at my notes once because y'all were just so much fun. This has been so much fun.
Wonderful. Yeah. I hope people enjoy listening because this was so much fun to do.
So let's get on to, and Louise, now you have warning, unlike last time when we just sprung on you this whole concept of favorite things. Not that we necessarily usually manage to prepare ahead of time, but who would like to start with favorite things? I'm happy to start because I did actually prepare mine.
Okay, no, go ahead.
Okay, so my favorite thing is just the Honeychurches, like the way they are, like watching Lucy and Freddie and their physicality, and just like when they're like wrestling and playing tennis, and they're just, I remembered how much when I watched the film for the first time and every time since then, it's just like when we're at their house and I'm just watching them interact with each other, they're just so much fun. Like even the mom, I think the mom ends up being more fun in the film than she is in the book. Like they all are just seem to be like smart and have a good sense of humor and just this rough housing and this beautiful house and like lawn tennis. It just,
yes. I love Freddie dancing Lucy up the hall and like crashing into things and the mom coming out and just kind of getting onto them. It's beautiful.
Right. And then this is like, it's interesting because this is something we loved also in Howard's End. Like I think that Forrester is really great at constructing family in a way that sometimes is just like a breath of fresh air.
There are particular types of families, though. It's
right, exactly.
That slightly sort of bohemian thing, which is a lot by the Visors, right? Sort of,
right.
Let's get Lucy away from that thing that they
are. Honeychurch taint.
Honeychurch taint. Yes. Oh God.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And it's the same. It's the exact same thing in Howard's End. Like he loves that kind of family. I love that kind of family, and I just, you know, this is, you know who your protagonists are when you see them in a Forrester story being part of that kind of family, and it's just this like love and vibrancy and physicality, and it just really gives me joy.
Yeah. So something we didn't even talk about at all. My favorite thing was costume design. Also the set design, but that less so. Particularly Italy actually kind of fell flat for me. I was really ready for Italy. I'm in love with Italy right now. I'm taking an Italian class and I'm watching all these Italian films. So it's like, oh, it's very gray. This is fine. Except for, of course, the beautiful kissing scene. But all of the costumes were gorgeous. I was stunned by the dress that Lucy wears in the Vise's house. Mm-hmm. That beautiful Edwardian, the dropped V-neck with all of the sequins, and holy smokes.
Yes.
And then Cecil, always, of course, very sharp, but specifically Freddie. Everything Freddie wore. I was just
stripes.
in love. The stripes with the boater hat and the three-piece suits. God, it was gorgeous. Just a feast for the eyes. I wanted every piece of costuming.
Totally agreed. But yes, Lucy's dress is one of my favorite costumes ever in anything.
I was also struck by how tiny she was.
I know, her waist is so small.
So tiny.
Tiny person. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So mine, I'm conflicted because this should be.
You can do two. totally allowed to do too.
Well, this is about the film, right? This is about the film, not the film and the book. Because for me, there are two things. Because there's
you weren't here for book conversations, so you
right.
can
We don't really have firm rules about these.
Okay. So the one thing is about the adaptation. So it's about the film and the book. It's about what I loved was about the adaptation, which encompasses the book as well, is from an actor's point of view, is that the process. So how amazing it was to watch the film and moments that I didn't notice really when I watched just the film. Having read the book, how those moments came to life for me, because I'd read the book and I was suddenly given the backstory and the weight of what informed those choices that actors made. Because you always ask yourself as an actor when you are given a scene, like, what does my character want? What does my character want in this scene? And it may not be obvious to you. You've got to you may have to make it up to give yourself some life in the scene, to give yourself some subtext, some value, some depth. With a lot of writing, you have to just make it up because it's not there, and the scene would just be completely wooden and forgettable if you didn't think about it. But to have the richness of the book behind it was amazing, and so many moments came to life. There was lots of dialogue from the book that was in the movie, but it was inconsequential almost in the movie. But if you've read the book, and because you read the book, all the words have the same value for you. In a movie, you're directed by the gaze of the camera, so things don't have much value. You're told what to give value to. The words are there often. The conversation is there, but you weren't directed towards it by the camera. But if you've read the book, everything has equal value. Yeah. And so suddenly the movie becomes richer because suddenly you're so much more aware of the stuff that's happening around the edges of what the camera is telling you to look at. So that I loved. I loved that aspect of the adaptation. And then just as a film, the moment that I loved the most, because you feel it coming. You know what book he's reading. And maybe you only feel it coming because I've seen it 15 times. Maybe when I saw it the first time, I didn't know it was coming. But that you know that it's Andrologia by Adina de Beach. And she goes, and she says, Ellen Lavish, wasn't she the lady? And she's so light and you know what's coming. You just know what's coming. And he says, there's a scene about the view, and no, it doesn't matter. I can't. She says, no, let's read it. We must read it. And you're like, oh God. And she's like, she starts to read it, and he's sitting right there, and he's looking at her feet. Her feet, like George is there, and he watches her feet, and she's looking at it, and she goes, oh, and you see, and then it says, and then Cecil takes it, and he creates his own demise.
I love that.
He takes it and he reads it, and it's so that moment for me is just
amazing.
It's just like it's all like it's unstoppable. This thing is gonna happen. Like it's gonna happen.
Yes, the inevitability and the anticipation. That's so good. That's great.
They also slipped in, I noticed this time when I was watching that they slipped in when they're driving away after the first kiss, you see Eleanor Lavish like in her carriage, like just looking really intrigued, thoughtful, like she just has there's like
a vulture.
Right. Yep. Right. You really see it. There is a moment that they just focus on Judi Dench so that you can have this, this thing stuck in your mind from the beginning that, it's just one of those neat, like rewatch / reading the book / rewatch moments where I was just like, oh, look at her.
Yeah. She's so like, oh, what's going on? Yeah.
Right, exactly, because she probably didn't know what happened, but she knew that like very suddenly Charlotte broke this whole party up for some reason. So you can see that Eleanor Lavish was going to get it out of her.
Gross. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all pretty great. Yeah. Louise, thank you so much for joining us again.
My absolute pleasure. I can't tell you how much I love these things, and I kind of want to just get together with you girls and just chat about other stuff all the time. So
okay, let's do that.
Right? Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Again.
Geography is not an issue. Clearly, we're talking to each other right now.
And thank you for bringing the book into my life, because I think the movie was so all-encompassing for me. I don't think I ever even considered reading the book. And the book has made the movie richer, if that was possible for me. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for being the inspiration for that. I mean, this is what happened at our last time we recorded together was like, we were like, well, obviously now we have to cover this because... So yeah, this has worked out well for everyone involved.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
Yeah, so much fun. Thank you to our listeners. Our next episode, we did say last time, we are going to go through a period now where we're going to give ourselves a little break from this intense period of reading and do just a bunch of films for the next little while. And we decided that the first one we're going to do is the 1994 Little Women. Winona Ryder, also someone that we could totally do a film festival on. I want Michelle Pfeiffer and Winona Ryder, all the actresses of my early teen years.
Sure.
So that'll be the next one. So watch That Little Women, and we can talk about that. We can also talk a little bit about if we have any thoughts about the one that is being done, I think right now, that's going to come out next year.
Yeah. Very exciting.
And everyone watch Black Sails because... Louise is amazing.
She is. It's true. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Until next time from Common Room Radio, I'm Elizabeth Stevens.
I'm Daphne Olive.
And I'm Louise Barnes.
Can I Just Say podcast is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and our other shows, visit commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can make a big difference. Visit patreon.com/commonroomradio to pledge support and access bonus features that are just for patrons. And join the conversation by using the hashtag #CanIJustSay and follow us on Twitter @JustSayPodcast. We request that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and you can always email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com. Thanks for listening.